So I guess not much seems to have changed in the 160 years since that reading I wrote, or read from, was written about Theodore Parker. At that time, New England society was very focused on the social gospel movement that I was talking about, that true Christians should be taking care of those less fortunate, particularly those in Boston who had lived in poverty because of the rapid industrialization that was going on at the time and the waves of immigration. Well, today I promise to talk about the more macro issues of income inequality in society and what we Unitarian Universalists should do about it. So the newsletter description for this service was this: the intersection of our social justice passions and the growing income inequality in our community creates so many possibilities for action. However, how we act is just as important as if we act. And so to prepare for this service, that quote, the last part of that quote, came from a study guide on escalating income inequality produced by the Unitarian Universalist Association. At the General Assembly in 2014, the Assembly had voted that wanted to be the study action issue for congregations for the next 4 years. And so the Unitarian Universalist Association always puts money aside to have experts pull a great study guide together. And it was really, really good, I've got to say. And it's something that I hope we are going to make use of here, even if it is past 2018, it doesn't matter. But I have to confess that as I was reading this, I think I bit off more than I could chew for this one sermon. It's primarily because you all know this. The causes of inequality are very complex, and the possibilities of finding the right solutions are equally complex. Now, I agree with the study guide's inherent assumption that we should act, but I also agree with its caution that how we do it is just as important. So today I decided that we should consider our time together this morning as sort of a kickoff to action, and we should use the time to begin the discernment process. So that's why you got that little handout, and we're going to be using that in a minute. What I'd like you to leave with from this service today is a sense of why we believe that this is important, and upon what fundamental assumptions do we think we should act as a congregation, and then some assurance that we can actually feel like we could make a difference in our corner of the world. So what am I not going to provide? If you came today thinking I'd provide all the answers in a checklist for interrupting the cycles of inequality, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you greatly. And if you came today expecting to hear me pontificate on the ills of the growing wealth gap, I can refer to you to many other resources written by people who are far more knowledgeable about the subject than I. What I will offer you today is some leadership grounded in our Unitarian Universalist faith as we interactively, and I mean interactively, begin to think about how we should act, and hopefully some inspiration to make it happen. So I'm going to jump right in. You should have, along with your order of service, received a document that looks like this. It's two-sided. One side, it says handout right at the top in case you wondered what it was when it was handed to you. The one side says wisdom sources, and it says pick one, and I do mean it, you need to pick one. And the back side says the canons of income distribution, and it says pick two. So let me walk you through this. The wisdom sources, this came right from the study guide, and if a congregation like ours is going to be present in the world and make a statement about income inequality and make a statement on possible ways to interrupt the cycle, from where do we come at this, right? We're Unitarian Universalists. We don't have this scripture or that doctrine that speaks to us universally, and so that's what this was created for, and it gives 12 different options. Now, it summarizes it. I can summarize it a little bit to say that the first 8, 1 through 8, are more traditional religious sources, and then 9, 10, 11, and 12 are more philosophical sources. So I'm going to read them through once with you, and we'll talk about what I want to do with them in a minute. So the top one is Hinduism, and all of these are points of view that are grounded in the traditions or the teachings or a scripture. It can be any of the above. Hinduism is there's enough wealth to meet everyone's need, but not everyone's greed. Buddhism, right livelihood is the maximum of well-being with the minimum of consumption. Very Buddhist sounding. Islam, wealth justly earned is a bounty from God and should be spent to redress imbalance. Judaism, God as creator finds poverty an affront to human dignity and enters into a covenant with humanity to share earth's abundance as widely as possible. So Christianity in general, God's prophet Jesus challenges the spiritual validity of the wealthy while taking on the poor as a special mission. Greco-Roman teaching, so more pre-Christian. Limits should be placed on both wealth and poverty. Plato said, "It is impossible to be both good and excessively rich." Now, Catholicism here, and it talks about Catholicism and John Ryan's canons. They're actually the canons that are on the back sheet of the paper, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But basically, John Ryan was a Catholic theologian that wrote in the mid-20th century his ideas on wealth redistribution and distributive justice. So you can just call that more Catholic teachings. And then Protestant teachings, by comparison, is there's a religious passion for equality which seeks a rough balance between a necessary individual freedom to prosper and the just claims of the poor, who must be included in the community. Obviously, it's Protestantism, so it talks a lot more about the individual, right? So I lump those in as all one grouping, as you would feel compelled to address this issue based on some sort of a tradition, a religious tradition that you hold dear, or teachings or something like that. So I will, if you're going to vote on that, it'll be all 8 together. I'm not going to go down one at a time. That's not what I'm here for today. Number 9 is, this is what I learned as an econ major in undergrad. Utilitarian teaching. Economic utility or efficiency is the prime value in economic distribution, for it will eventually maximize the economic goods of all beneficiaries. Classic economic theory. Number 10, libertarian teaching. Economic justice is the result of maximizing individual liberty in pursuit of economic ends, provided the rules of the game are fair and enforced. Number 11 is a social contract. Economic justice in distribution is basically an agreement within a free society to meet the basic needs of all by limiting individual liberty to the smallest extent possible. And then finally, number 12, a covenantal pragmatism. The needs of the poor take moral priority over the wants of the rich. The freedom of the dominated takes moral priority over the liberty of the powerful. The participation of marginal groups take moral priority over the order that excludes them. So it's dense. There's a lot here. So I'm going to give you probably 30 seconds to look at this again. And I'm not writing it down. After today, no one will ever remember what you voted on. It doesn't matter. I just kind of want to get a sense of the congregation and where we would come from if we were to act. Okay? So I'll be quiet for a minute and get a drink of water. Okay, so a show of hands or movement or something to let me know where you stand or sit or think on this. Number 1 through 8. Who would approach it based on more of a classic religious tradition perspective? Wow. So we got probably, I'm going to guess that's about a little more than half the room. Okay. Number 9, much more, really still believes in economic theory, that if it was done right, it would work. Anybody? I did as an undergrad, but I guess I would be alone there. Libertarian teaching. Anybody on the libertarian side? I'm surprised. Usually in UU circles there's libertarian, strong libertarian thinking. Number 11, the social contract. All right, a few. Thank you. And then the last one, number 12, covenantal pragmatism. So a little bit, okay, so that's probably about a quarter of the folks. Cool. All right. I had no idea how it would turn out. So I guess then what that would mean is if we went out of these walls and were speaking in public, we would probably do more discernment. I mean, I lumped 8 different religious statements together. I would want to know, does it come out of more Judeo-Christian roots or Hindu or Buddhist, or maybe it's a blend, and we would make a statement that was a little bit more nuanced. And I don't want to leave the covenantal programming pragmatism out either, but it seems like you could mix the two together, that you get covenantal pragmatism based on a lot of the religious quotes up in the top. All right, the back side. That was pretty easy. This side gets a little more complicated. Okay, so this is John Ryan's Canons of Income Distribution, and I found these fascinating. And I said pick 2, because I knew most of the people in here would pick number 1, and so that was too easy. So number 1 talks about the people at the lowest rungs of society socioeconomically, and it has the language of inherent worth and dignity. Let me read it. All human beings have an inherent right to have their basic human needs met before any economic surplus is distributed to others. For example, your income during childhood and youth would doubtless be informed by the canon of need, as you probably did little work to earn your income. I thought that was a fantastic example. So I assume, I'm not going to even vote on that one because I assume most of us would agree with that one. The others are these nuanced ways to think about, okay, if that's true, then what about the top side? Like, who should we reward with the most money? When is it okay to have an income gap? And so this I thought was fascinating. So I'm going to read them again with you and then try to think of which one. You don't have to wholeheartedly agree with it, but just which one would you lean towards? Number 2, the canon of proportional equality. Every human being should be limited in consumption of income and wealth by the principle of sufficiency. For example, say you were on welfare for 5 years and were sustained at a basic level by social services with money generated from tax dollars. That is a floor. Say you then hit the lottery, but there was a lottery tax that limited your winnings to 50% of the cash value. That is a ceiling. So in other words, what does everybody need to sustain life? And then there's a judgment on what is too much. And you would tax away what we believe is too much and help fund the programs for everybody else. Number 3, the canon of contribution to the common good. Persons should be remunerated on the basis of their value to the community. Say that you're a teacher of the year at your local college and have educated dozens of young women and children, or young men and women, in the duties of citizenship. Your advice is sought by both political parties who want to know the impact of alternative policies on the community. You are able to lift the level of community political debate. That would merit consideration for higher remuneration because of your contribution. So you're out there serving the common good better than anyone else, and so you should be paid the most in your community. That's one way to think about it. Number 4, the canon of productivity. Persons should be remunerated in proportion to the goods and services they produce for society. Say you're a chief executive officer of a company that makes containers for food. The company is extremely efficient, supplies many well-paid jobs in the community, and pays a hefty property tax for the local government. So you're really out there producing, so therefore it's okay that you make a lot of money and live in a big house. Number 5, the canon of effort and sacrifice. Persons should be remunerated according to how hard they work and the extent to which they commit themselves to their task, even at considerable cost to their personal well-being. For example, say you are a social worker in an AIDS hospital in the middle of the ghetto. Although you are not contributing much to the gross national product, you are of inestimable value in contributing to the quality of life of several people over time. Your work is cited much like Mother Teresa's, and your life is touted as a model for the society. You have contributed much by giving so much of yourself in effort and sacrifice. That one's pretty radical, because usually the people that we hear of that are doing these things are at great cost to themselves, financially, physically, even safety-wise. So that'd be pretty radical to pay them the most. And then finally, the canon of scarcity. Think think all-star football player here. Persons who have unique and hard-won skills that are necessary for the society should be rewarded more generously than others who have skills not needed as much. Perhaps you are known as a world-class scientist with an income in the six-figure range. The canon of scarcity would apply, since your income reflects the relative scarcity of persons with your unique skills. And I said the football player because we live in Green Bay Packer territory, and you always read about these salaries. And this one in particular, I think of, well, who's to judge what is most valuable to society? If you're really a big Packer fan versus you want a scientist, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of issues surrounding that one as well. None of these are slam dunks. So I need you to vote again. And this one we are going to go down it all except for number 1. So are we ready? I'm going to be cognizant of time. So number 2, the canon of proportional equality. All right, I'm going to have to count, I think, sort of. About 15-ish. How's that? I should have Audrey count for me. It's okay.
Better.
Number 3, the canon of contribution to the common good. All right, so about 6-ish. Oh, just 1. So I'm assuming you voted for 1. Sorry, I should have said that. You're picking 2. I'm assuming you're voting for number 1, so you can only vote for one of these others. Thank you.
Vote for a second one. That's what you're saying?
No, sorry, I wasn't clear.
You didn't know it.
Yes, I made you vote for number 1. Thank you, that wasn't clear. Okay, number 4, the canon of productivity. If you're really cranking out the stuff for a community and it's not toxic and that kind of thing, you should be paid the most. Anybody? All right. Number 5, the canon of effort and sacrifice. This is the Mother Teresa example. Okay, about 4 or 5, 6, about the same as the other one. And the canon of scarcity. So if you've got super scarce skills, you should be paid the most. Okay, very fascinating. So it seems like the 2, let's see, the canon of proportional equality got the most, followed by the common good and effort and sacrifice. So that again would be an area that we would probably have discussions about, because each one of those, it opens up numerous possibilities of how you would approach it with tax law and redistributing government involvement. And sometimes it can become very academic, and in some cases, I kind of mentioned that, it becomes very subjective, like who gets to decide what society really needs. And I remember, back when Russia decided to experiment with communism, that's what they were trying to do, is like, this is what we decided we need. Well, then it changes over time and people forget to go change that. So you might still be building a lot of tractors you needed in the 1940s and it's now the 1980s and it doesn't work out so well. So there's a lot of different possibilities of solutions. And so once again, I got this from the study guide and I thought it was fascinating. If we had some dialogue, we would want to go out into the world to say, we are grounded in this belief because of this, and we really want to focus on these particular areas because this is where we feel it's most strongly. So my point of all that is that there's endless possibilities to follow Theodore Parker's request for greater justice, which removes the causes of income inequality, and it would need to be guided by your Unitarian principles and grounded in what's important to Open Circle. We shouldn't be out there doing something just because the UUA says so. We should be doing something that we feel strongly about. And then we should really focus on a place where I believe we can make a difference. So it gets to what should we do? What could we do? And when I was thinking about that and pondering it, the metaphor of tossing the pebble into a pond and the ripples that go out, and it was said, if you throw even a small pebble into a pond or a river or a lake, at the right moment, those ripples can have a huge impact upstream, downstream as they go out. And that made me think about this fellowship. I mean, we're small in the Fond du Lac community. Fond du Lac is small relative to the state of Wisconsin, but yet you can have ripples that have a huge voice and make a big difference if done right. And one of the things I was thinking about and discussing with some folks was the living wage example. Because that's an issue that directly addresses the people that are working, but yet they're working poor. You know, you're getting food stamps even though you have a full-time job at some minimum wage in some of the markets. And it's been done before. It's done in California, I forget a couple of other places in the country where they've actually enacted living wage. And this isn't just a minimum level, just to be clear. It isn't like, well, get your wage up to where you can barely afford anything. This was, well, you could comfortably afford a minimum standard of living in the community. So that's an area that's very localized that people could do to address some of those issues. And in theory, you wouldn't have to spend so much on subsidizing programs as well. So it would shift things in the marketplace so it's people that are actually working are getting the money straight up. It's not going through a bureaucracy of government. That's the kind of thing I was thinking about, and I would love to discuss more. But I have some examples of where this happened. Something similar happened, and it's the Appleton Fellowship. Many of you know I've been a member there for over 25 years. 25 years ago, the minister and a couple of leaders in that fellowship decided that there needed to be more diversity in the Fox Valley, and the diversity was coming, but it wasn't being managed very well. And so they went out and created an organization. I know it already exists here, but to try to focus on diversity and how the community could manage diversity better. Well, one thing led to another, and within, I think, about 10 years, maybe a little less, they had a member of the staff of City Hall was focused just on diversity. That was their title. And I happened to be at a gathering recently at Lawrence University. We were talking about diversity, and I didn't know this, but Appleton was the first place in the state to have a diversity officer in city government. Milwaukee and Madison came later. And I know that that came out of the work from the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Appleton and the minister and the leaders there. So I was really proud about that. And the other example was the LGBTQ area. When marriage equality and the whole debate erupted, the Appleton Fellowship was already known as the fellowship that was doing union ceremonies and was very LGBTQ friendly. And so when that erupted, who was on the front page and speaking to the newscasters? But it was the ministers and the leaders of that congregation. And that was one of those ripples where they threw the pebble in years earlier, but it came back in huge, much bigger voice than the percentage of the population that belongs to that congregation. And so that's what I kind of see could happen here, that we could really work on an issue for income distribution that's local and get a voice. And in my opinion, it would probably have to happen at the county level, because the city is always too small for that, because businesses can move across borders. And I just found out, or happened to hear, that we have a little bit of influence at the county government in this congregation. I know there's a lot of people that are involved in the county government here. So it might be somewhere we would want to start. And like I said, I'd want to have more conversation on that. So where I want to ultimately lead with this is that we are about to do our stewardship kickoff. And the stewardship kickoff, now what has that got to do with income distribution and redistribution? In my mind, it has to do with an example like this of social justice. So you may have gotten your pledge card or not. Marge made some gorgeous handmade cards for you to see, and then there's some information inside. But the ultimate is we're looking for a 25% increase in the budget next year, and we are hoping that people can think about what they can give and give whatever they can do. But I want to stress that you're not paying for the lights or my salary or that. That's not really the focus. The focus is you're paying for that stone. You're paying for that stone that will be put into the pond or the stream to create the ripples way into the future and really make a difference in this community. And that's what I want you to take away from today. Because in the words of Theodore Parker, we need the charity that palliates effects of wrong and the greater justice which removes the cause. So may that greater justice be caused by our ripples and your generosity to provide the stone. Amen. And I know we are late on time today, so let's go